This happens to me like all the time. Dude is like, we'll start talking and then I'll just go and then we'll start talking and then I'll forget to record or something. Um, but I was trying to think the first time we didn't really meet, but we were at the Stanford camp together, I think in like 2012. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, the crippler, I do remember that one. Yeah, I do remember that.
Cause we got lost. It was like me, you, one of my high school teammates, and a few other guys. Because there was somebody that was like way in front, and there was a counselor with on a bike that was with them,
Yeah,
and there was some turn that you had to make late on the campus loop,
yeah.
and we all just went right past it because we didn't see the guy in front of us. And I think we went like I don't know, probably an extra mile maybe. And then we were like, okay, this seems like it's going on a little bit too long when you figure
Yeah,
out where we're at.
I remember that. That was a tough camp. That was with Borelli, I think, was when he was the head coach there. Yeah, that was a good camp, and we stayed in the dorms and everything, and it was tough. I remember there was a lot of good talent, and remember this technique like the off of a Turk series where they I forget. Yeah, he had the basically it's where you reach back with the leg when you have a Turk, and
Yeah.
and you could. I don't know if it's legal anymore where you can actually put your hips over the foot, like when you're turking the leg. But I think it's just you got to be careful in that situation. But yeah, I do remember that. That's awesome. And we talked actually at Stanford too in college. I remember before one of the duels. I think it was a three-way duel. CBU wasn't didn't duel Bakersfield that year, but I think or we did that year, but not at that three-way duels at Stanford. And I think you were wrestling Stanford. We had talked before too. So, but yeah, Crippler camp. I remember that. That was a really great camp. It was tough too.
Yeah, that was I think my second year doing it, and which always makes it easier the second time around. But I think when there was one we were doing, I think they call it the dish. It's like that big hill with like a
Yeah,
path going up it, and there was one where you had to do some sprints from the bottom. And for some reason, I remember the year before, I think Ray Blake is going to just say, "All right, now you're going to go all the way up to the top," and we weren't supposed to go to the top. And I was like, "I know it's coming at the end." And then as soon as he said it, I'm like, "Ah, I knew you were going to do it. We're going to catch me off guard."
yeah, because you wrestled at Arbor, is that right? Or
Yeah, Harbor. Yeah, in Santa Cruz.
that's awesome. Yeah, what so was summer camps pushed pretty hard, or was it just a personal decision that you wanted to train over the summer?
Yeah. Well, I never really. I mean, I love my high school coaches, but I moved actually to Santa Cruz from Illinois in seventh grade, and the place I was at in Illinois. If I would have kept going and wrestled in high school there, it would have been the same high schools like Abe Assad and Austin Gomez and Brian Murphy and Tony Ramos. And I ended up moving, and I went from an area that's like super high in wrestling to a place that's just high all the time. I mean, Santa Cruz is pretty laid back, and there wasn't really a lot of wrestling.
Yeah,
So anytime I had an opportunity to go travel, um, and go to a camp, and at the time, I had lofty goals. Like I had pretty decent grades at the time, and I'm like, yeah, I would try to wrestle at Stanford or go wherever I could to go get, some wrestling.
man, I didn't know about that. Or yeah, I didn't know that about you that you moved from Illinois. That's really cool. Yeah, I had no idea. And that
Closet Bears fan,
yeah,
uh, unfortunately, but
maybe this year they've had some tough goes and everything, but Illinois, yeah, that I went to the Crippler camp too because I was interested in wrestling there and my grades were decent, but just it wasn't, the end of the day was wanted to stay local at Cal Baptist, and I had a relationship with Coach Zaleski already, and it just didn't. The cards weren't in it for Stanford, but that was also why my brother and I went there because we were interested in the program, and academics is obviously important and things like that. So that's what we were kind of wanted to get our exposure there.
yeah, for sure. Kind of talk about your recruiting process a little bit because I think you ended up getting was it fourth or fifth maybe at state your senior year, our senior year.
Yeah.
And obviously super talented wrestler. You come from a family of wrestlers. I guess talk about what your experiences, I guess, was like in trying to figure out where you want to go.
Yeah, I think there wasn't a lot of interest, I'll say it, until I won the freak show the summer leading into senior year. I ended up beating Paul Fox, and then gosh, I can't recall his name, but in the finals, Zimmer, I think, from
Hmm.
maybe. And so I was talking to the Old Dominion coach there, really nice guy, and also Cal Poly, a little bit with Oregon State. Um, and mainly that was it. I mean, I had a couple leads or, a couple Division I programs I was speaking to. Otherwise, it was just Coach Zaleski and Coach Arson out of Cal Baptist. And yeah, I have a funny story. I was called by an Oregon State coach, and this was after I had committed to Cal Baptist, and I'm just a clueless kid. I'm on the phone with him, and it's like he's going on for an hour, and we're talking. Now I look back and I'm like, I feel so bad. Like I'm just a silly kid, and I think I'm just talking to him almost like he's just calling me to have a conversation and everything. In an hour in, he's like, okay, well, what are you thinking about Oregon State? And I told him that. Well, actually, I verbaled Cal Baptist like a week ago, and now on the phone, I'm like, or now thinking about it, I'm like, what an idiot! Like, what was I doing? But and he was like, he kind of like laughed and chuckled, and because he knew it was like I'm just a clueless kid, but he ended up just getting off the phone real fast because, of course, time matters too. They got to recruit other kids. Um, but at that time, really, Cal Baptist was kind of on my radar just because of the location and Coach Zaleski. I mean, the guys, I love them to death, and Coach Arson was pretty great at getting in contact with me, and I think they saw some of my abilities early on, whereas a lot of the Division I programs, they just, you have to meet certain quota. You have to, be placing in state early on, or qualifying early on and things like that. So I think I just wasn't under the radar necessarily. And I went to Fargo once. Long story short, it was between sophomore year and junior year that summer. Cut cut weight to make 132, which was the weight class I wrestled sophomore year. And for whatever reason, the coaches the day of Fargo told me that, hey, we have too many 132 pounders. You're going to have to bump up to 138. And
Oh gosh.
to me, that's like, I kind of got a bad taste in my mouth from that experience. You pay a lot of money to go there and to make weight. I sucked myself down to the same weight I wrestled that season. And then just to wrestle these guys that are cutting, probably from 160 down to 38, they're just bigger bodies. I just got wrecked, So then I got a little jaded from that experience. I didn't want to go to Fargo again. But when you're not doing some of those things, sometimes you're not on their, Division I radar.
Yeah.
But I did, I was talking to Old Dominion, especially after the freak show win and Oregon State and Cal Poly. Those are the main schools that I was speaking with.
Yeah, for a second I thought Tyler Zimmer went to Old Dominion, but I think he went to Columbia. But the blue is kind of the same. So in my head, I'm like, man, you beat him, and then that would have been funny if you take a scholarship too.
Yeah, yeah, he went. That's right. He went to Columbia, and we wrestled in the state tournament. He beat me in the last for to go for third and fourth. He switched me in the last like 2 seconds. I was up, went on top instead of going for like just a normal tight waist, just breakdown to just secure the win on top. I went for like a when you reach down and you grab the knee and the ankle.
Yeah.
But and when I went to do that, he switched me in the last like 2 seconds. It's one of those matches that it's like that one stays with you because it's right there at the end and I mean he got me fair and square. It was a good match but it did stick with you because you beaten the kid before and it's one of those things that he had the heart. He stuck in it the last couple seconds.
Well, I think being a three-time All-American and national finalist, maybe that's kind of shifts your when you think back into wrestling. Hopefully, it doesn't stick with you that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think in college, things started to come together a little bit more.
Yeah.
My dad, he was my coach in high school, and love him to death. I think he's an amazing coach, and he taught me a lot. He wrestled at University of Iowa. He has a really great background, and I don't want to sound ungrateful for that. I'm extremely grateful. He was a wonderful coach, but there's something about wrestling almost for your own and, coming into your your game, if you want to say it that way, or just enjoying the sport for yourself. And even though I was still in the same city as my parents, it was when I went to college, it became more of my own journey, I guess. And I think that I enjoyed wrestling a lot more. I had fun with it. And Coach Zaleski was very different than my dad. My dad was extremely intense and, would talk about like what you did wrong after every match. Whereas Coach Zaleski didn't, I can't recall a time that he actually said what you did wrong. He would say what you did right and maybe what you could improve on. And so it's kind of a stark difference. And some kids, they need a coach that'll kick them in the butt a little bit,
Yeah.
more intense. I wasn't that. I was more the kid that's going to already put in the effort, and I don't need a lot of slapping around. It was more just I kind of needed encouragement, So it was a difference, and I think that really helped me, the difference of coaching. But but all that being said, my dad, I mean, I'm extremely grateful, and he was an awesome coach. And it's just sometimes it is coaching styles, and that's why it's nice to have, a good staff with different coaches, different techniques, different philosophies.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine coaching your own like son when it comes to something that you're both passionate about. I have a couple guys that I coach with that are coaching their sons on our team, and it's always something that's like, man, like I don't know how you do that. And it's tough for them, and it's tough for the kids sometimes to navigate because I think for the kids, it's not. It's like it becomes your thing together that you guys share, and it's hard, I think, for them to sometimes separate between coach and wrestler.
Yeah.
And then when you, like you said, let's say you come off the mat and it's like all the things that you did wrong. It's not your coach necessarily that's telling you what you did wrong. It's your dad, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I could ever do it. Like
Yeah.
somebody else is going to have to coach my kid.
I agree with you there. I I'd like to be involved in. I have a 4-month-old boy now, and
Yeah, congratulations. That's
thank,
awesome.
thank you so much. I'd like to be involved, and at the end of the day, I mean, wrestling is the greatest sport. I would love if he wrestled, but I'm not even. At least as of now, like I don't even want to push him to do it because it's not a sport that you can push someone to do. They have to love it for themselves. It's too difficult. It's not like your typical fun sports like, football, baseball, other sports where and this wrestling, it's a lifestyle and it's
Yeah.
brutal and you gotta want to do it, So I hope he wrestles, but I don't want to put any pressure on him.
It's not a rec sport by any means.
Yeah.
Like, I think, if you want to have success at it, it's like you kind of have to sacrifice a little bit and maybe give more of your life to it.
Yeah.
And if you're not really down for it, you're not going to have a good performance. At some
Yeah.
point, it's going to be tough to do.
Absolutely.
But I love it, man. Like I even now, it's like I was trying to get after it yesterday, and it kind of jacking at my shoulder a little bit, maybe going a little bit too hard. But it's one of those things where, yeah, I love it. Especially now, like coaching, it's like being able to help other people reach their goals, and I feel like I got so much better at the sport because I had to figure it out to help other people.
Yeah.
Have you ever like I don't know how much coaching of wrestling you're doing. I know you're doing some jujitsu stuff and maybe teaching a little bit jujitsu. How's that going?
It's going great. I see that in you, that you're passionate about passing along your knowledge and your skill and instilling in this in other kids. And I think that's at the end of the day, that's the most honorable thing you can do. There's a quote that uh, your greatest accomplishment are the ones that you leave behind. It's about your legacy, but it's not a personal legacy. It's about the way in which you're able to share your knowledge and instill passion maybe in someone else that you can help them become successful in the future. And I coached 1 year in high school with my dad again, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, there's no other job that I've done that's harder than coaching, because at that time it was right fresh out of college. It was the year after, because I took a 1 year break between Cal Baptist and law school, and I worked for my dad and also coached for him. And I think at that point I was so highly, like, still within the competitive mindset that I did a disservice to some of the kids. Like, I was so invested in, okay, this is my first year of coaching. What is it going to look like on me? And what is their success? I think I intertwined their success with my success, and I think that was a big mistake. And was really tough on the kids, and I honestly would become like angry if if they quit or they just didn't seem like they're fully into it. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think that now that I haven't been coaching for a while, or I'm coaching in another aspect. You mentioned jujitsu. My mindset kind of shifted, and I've seen the success that my brother has had at at North High School, and
Yeah.
the way that he coaches, and I just realized that it's not about at the end of the day, and I think I made it about me too much. um, so if I were to go back and coach, it would be more just trying to instill values in the kids and character, and not necessarily focus don't necessarily focus too much on the outcome. Because I think we had a lot of good seniors that year. They were just kind of checked out, and it drove me kind of nuts because I was, you're fresh out of college, and you're very like, like you were in a extremely tough conference. You had Zahid Valencia right there. I think you took second. Like, you had him in the finals. Like, you had a absolute grind of a conference, and competitive, or competitors. And when you come out of that environment, you're very, I think, focused on doing well and excellence, and things like that. So I think I just had a little bit too much of that mindset, and I wasn't ready to just have that, I guess, broad view of coaching, and the greater, I guess, just like a more zoomed out version. And
Yeah.
so I struggled with coaching, but jujitsu has been great. And I think because the thing with these kids at the school that I train at is they're competing, and they're extremely hungry to learn wrestling, because they don't come from that background. Like, matter of fact, like, one of our kids he's a baseball kid. He just grew up playing baseball, played in college, and then just decided to switch over because he likes like
Right.
UFC and things like that. So he's just like eager to learn wrestling. So it's like kind of a stark difference than what I had in high school. And so that's been really fun, because it's just about making it fun for them and teaching them little fun, fundamental skills. And you can see the progression a lot. So I know my brother said a lot, like, his kids, they don't come from very good environments. A lot of them, their coaches aren't even, or excuse me, their parents aren't even in the picture. And so those kids, I mean, he said they're very hungry to learn. They're really eager, and for him that makes a difference too.
Yeah.
If it's two sided, you're pouring in a lot, and you're passionate, and the kids are also passionate, and they want to learn. So
Yeah, I think it's like it's tough coming in, I think, as somebody that is competitive and showing up and the kids are checked out or they're just not interested.
yeah,
And I had a similar situation with the high school that I first coached at. It's like we had kids that, we end up not performing well at our master's tournament, didn't qualify anybody to state. And we're taking the kids out to dinner and they're laughing at the end of the table. And I snapped at them. I'm like, why are you laughing? Like, this should hurt, because I think about all the pain that I've
yeah,
had. And it's like, this should matter,
yeah,
and I think it's something that for them, there's a way to maybe kind of give them that vibe in a way that's a little more positive and not yelling at them. But I think you only really get that wide view that you were talking about through sometimes doing it the wrong way.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and it's just you just kind of figure it out as you go.
Yeah, I think you're so right about that. And yeah, I think it, and I may not even have snapped necessarily on the kids. I think it was more internally I was freaking out. It's like, why am I like, I thought I was a pretty decent wrestler. Like, why can't I not translate that skill to coaching? And I think that it really, I mean, you see a lot of good wrestlers that it's a very fine-tuned skill to be able to articulate technique or coach. And it's not just about technique and articulating that. It's about being a mentor and a counselor to these kids too. And so I think that I just didn't have that skill at the time. And I think at some point, if I go back, I'd have a better wide view, like you were talking about. And I think I would do better. But at least initially, some wrestlers, they're just, especially my style, I was pretty athletic, and not the most, I wouldn't say that I was the most technical either. So it's whereas my brother, he's very technical in the ties. He has a lot of like, he's very fundamental, and good all around. So I think he can really benefit with, or the kids can benefit from his instruction. Not to say they can't from mine. It's just some wrestlers, just the way their style is or the way that they their game. It's not as trans.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that wide view is something that I think, yeah, messing up. Like I didn't really realize that until after I looked back and I was like, maybe I was a little, my mindset wasn't right going into it.
Yeah, I think definitely being a a husband and I'm sure a father at some point for me, and I'm sure for you, it kind of changes your perspective on life a little bit. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, like wrestling is not my identity. It's something that I love doing, and it's something that I care about. But like, it's not gonna like if a kid doesn't win or if they don't do what they're supposed to, I'm gonna be upset. I'm gonna be disappointed, but I'm not gonna like have this internal crisis. But if you flash back where, I'm 23 and I'm coaching for the first time, it was like every single moment when I'm in the corner matters like so much to everything in my being. And it's like, all right, I probably need to not have that mentality because it
Yeah.
puts too much pressure on me. I'm going to be miserable all the time and the kids aren't going to have a good experience. And, that's kind of the most important thing, especially for high school.
Absolutely. I think you said it right too. Marriage definitely gave me another perspective, and congratulations. I think you got, was it July last year?
Yeah. Last summer.
Congratulations. That's awesome. Marriage and having a kid has been another, has given a fresh perspective. And a lot of it, I think, comes down to sacrifice. You have to, especially as a college athlete, a lot of it is about, taking care of yourself and whether it be your diet, your routine, your schedule. And when you have a significant other, your wife, then your life does change because now it's not just about your schedule, it's about someone else's schedule. And living with someone's a huge difference, having to make sacrifices in that respect too. And having a kid is also, I mean, it's been another reflection period where I have to realize, okay, it's not about me, and I have to make changes in my life. That's going to going to help raising my young child. So yeah, I think that's brought a lot of perspective to coaching and just to life in general. And wrestling, it isn't in our identity, and you're so right about that. I think there's things that you can bring from wrestling. There's those matches where you stick in it and you end up winning, or you have those really gritty matches, and you can take that character or that mentality to life. That even when that you're having a terrible week, like we've all had those days, you go home and you're just like, what am I doing? Or
Yeah.
this is just maybe not right for me, and you're kind of reconsidering like whether you want to do something else, and then but you stick through it and you see the fruit of that later. But I think that's more of a character that wrestlers have, that they're extremely gritty and they're going to keep trying their best.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's just a vehicle, and I think it's at some point you have to get out of it. Like you have to get off it. You have to go do other things. Because if you don't, and you don't bring that stuff that you learned from the sport with you, it's like, why were you really doing it? Like you're just trying
Yep.
to get your hand raised. I mean, all that stuff kind of fades eventually. And if you're somebody that's like, and I'm sure we both can maybe think of people that are like this, but maybe had some success at some level in the sport, and then that was like their peak of their life, and they still carry it with them.
Yep, absolutely. That we all know, from high school, or a lot of times kids that were from youth, like they're killer in their youth program and on the youth stage, and then they kind of fizzle out a little bit. And I think it goes back to what you said. It goes back to whether you make it your identity, or whether it's about the person that you become after wrestling. And that says a lot about the coaching too. It's ultimately, like, you as a coach, you have that's a huge responsibility that it's you're pouring into these kids, and where you place your values will ultimately have an effect on your kids as well. So if for you it's about the way the people that they are after high school, then that's gonna, I think, pay dividends to these kids in the future.
It's tough getting them out of that mindset sometimes too. It's funny you bring up kids that were good when they were younger and then they kind of like that was it. We had a kid who came out after the season or like really towards the end of the season, like we were in our postseason and he had saw one of our duels and was like, oh, dude, I want to come back out to wrestling. But when he was a kid, like he was like a Reno champ, like would cut a bunch of weight sometimes. And I wasn't coaching him, but, kind of stopped wrestling for a few years and kind of gotten away from the sport. And then, his freshman year, he had a couple buddies that were doing it. It's like, yeah, this looks pretty cool. I want to come back and do it. And he wrestled the tournament and it kind of happened that, what you would expect. He was good for like 30 seconds. I'm like, I saw like, dude, this guy's still pretty good. And then
Yeah.
after 30 seconds, just gassed out, like just could barely stand, was taking injury time so he could go throw up. And it
Yeah.
was funny. He comes off to the mat. He's like, man, that kid wasn't even that good. Like, that kid sucks. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not about that. Like, I'm just happy you're here wrestling again. Like, that's awesome. And you're
Yeah.
doing it because it's for you. So try to get him to change his mentality. Like, yeah, this is, we have to kind of rebuild some things and that's going to be okay. It's going to be a process. But just his like, man, that kid sucked. Like, I shouldn't have lost to him. Like, you haven't
Yeah.
wrestled in like 4 years, bro. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. You're going to figure it out.
Good for you. That's awesome, Brian. And yeah, that's says a lot that you instill that mentality in your kids.
Well, it's easier said than done. I mean, like, but yeah, it's supposed to be fun. Like it's fun for me when kids are excited about it. It's like if you're not excited about it, like I'm not going to be excited about it.
Yeah. I remember there was a shift in college where I actually really did enjoy wrestling. I loved going to practice every day. Like it was the highlight of my day. And I think that was somewhere between my sophomore and junior year. There was something just a mental, it was almost a choice. I decided that I don't have, I recall thinking to myself, I don't have many years wrestling anymore. I might as well make the best of this. And I've, done it a lot, put a lot of hours in, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Might as well just enjoy it these last couple of years. And I remember it was a decision, a voluntary, like I'm gonna like this, and I just remember it made a big difference. Like on campus, we had a little, you could skate around like on your longboard or whatever. I remember just every day just skating to practice, like big smile on my face, like coffee in my hand, like this is going to be fun. I'll have a good practice. And I think that really changed my performance too, where I wasn't as nervous. It wasn't like, especially dual meets, I would get really nervous because it's just one match, and everybody's watching it. And I wasn't like, if you look at my record, dual meet versus tournament, it'd probably show a stark difference because I'd be really nervous in dual meets. But after that mental shift, I wasn't very nervous, and it was more about just going out there, doing your best, and controlling what you can, and that's all you can do. Just go out, have fun, and whether you get your hand raised or not, it doesn't matter if you're enjoying it. So that was a big shift in my wrestling.
Yeah, and I think CBUs would have pretty rocking dual meets sometimes. I remember going in the gym and the flashing lights and like the smoke and it's not like I can't remember the name of the gym, but it wasn't like a big event center like how they had with the Iowa duel.
Yeah,
Um, but it was man, it just was like a cool atmosphere to go compete in. And I always love those kinds of atmospheres. It's always fun kind of rolling into enemy territory, especially if they, like I said, if they care about it. I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, this is gonna be fun.
It's great for the sport. Yeah, it's the Van Dyne gym, so it's an older gym and everything. But CBU did a good job with the production. And my wife right now, she we didn't even know it, or she didn't know at the time, but she was watching me wrestle at one of the dual meets, and then we ended up meeting later, and she talked about how she had watched me compete at one of the dual meets. So it's just, you never know, like who is it's a really it's a super cool it's like, I mean, there's nothing closer to like maybe other than like UFC, but it is like the gladiator. Like you're going out there, it's just you, and you got a lot of witnesses watching and things like that. So it's very cool. It's, I think, unique to our sport for sure.
That's a good marketing tool for wrestling. Like, hey, come out and try the sport out. Like, you could find your wife.
Yeah.
Your wife could be in the stands watching you.
Yep. She maybe a little bit TMI, but she, kind of talking to her friends because the cheer girls came there and they're like, "Oh, who's that? Who's that?" And her friend, or she, like had asked about me, and her friend's like, "No, not that guy. Like he's a little bit like he's got himself into some trouble." And so we kind of laugh about that now, but it worked out. And she's worked out, and I think God works in mysterious ways, and so now we're here. But yeah.
Have you, and this might be too personal of a question, but like, have you always been, you felt like pretty strong with your faith, or is that something that's kind of grown over time? Just especially now as you're, like you said, your perspective changes, you know, your husband, your father. Um, I mean, would you be okay with talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I have always been a person of faith. I was, raised as a Christian, I guess you could say. But um, I think growing up, you have your questions, which is good, and you have your questions about how does this, why am I here? What is my purpose? Why, what created all this? If you think that there's a creator, and especially having, being married and having a kid now, I think it just reminds me of the richness of life. And really, I mean, you go through, like, I was there in labor, and it's a crazy experience. You're seeing this little human come out of someone, and it's kind of just, in my mind, there's no way to, I don't think that you look at just this earth, and the way, all, the way that the sun comes up every day, the sea, like, just, I guess my point is that even like mathematics, you can see that there's a design to this world. I think, and it's not by random chance that this came together. But I think my faith has grown stronger with having a kid and being married. But it was a big part of my wrestling career too. I mean, at the end of the day, it's I think that I wrestling is, like we've talked about, one of the most difficult sports known to man. And sometimes you have your really low lows, you don't get your hand raised, and feels like your world is falling apart to some extent. And having your faith to, I guess, if you want to say, lean back on, was a good thing for me, because sometimes I was really difficult on myself, especially in high school. And there were times that felt like, how do I pick myself up after this? Like, how do I move on? And I think having having faith also is tied with your identity. Like, it's not about, your identity isn't in wrestling. It's, you're a child of God, or you have a big greater purpose, and maybe that this loss, or this, I guess, terrible thing that happened in your life is forming you. It's forming your character to be a better person in the future, con- um, to use this as an example for other people, maybe, or a testimony for someone that you talk to in the future. So I think it's more that it just, it reminded me that it's not all about wrestling, that we have other big things in life. And most important is that there's purpose to what we're doing, that there's a design to all of this, and that things happen for a reason.
Yeah, and I think as wrestlers, sometimes it's hard to like buy into that part. Like things are happening outside of your realm of control.
Yeah.
Which is weird because wrestling is filled with uncontrollables, you know. And I think a lot of times we try to control as many things as we can within our sport, but it's just things are just going to happen and they're going to, you know, knock you down. And it's like, how do you get back up? And I think it's like it's awesome when you have, you know, maybe a really strong support network of people that can kind of help get you up. But I think like the biggest thing, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, is normally you find God when you're in those moments, like when you've been totally like just crushed, and it's like, all right, like how do I really figure this out? And it's like, you know, it's kind of like the mathematical equation with
Yeah.
the equal sign, and then it's just like God's right there. God's been there the whole time, you know,
Yep.
trying to help you figure it out. And I think just trying to be open to that, I think is at least for me, it's been hard in the past, but as I've gotten older, it's just, yeah, whenever something happens, it's like, all right, like I know why. I know the real reason why things are happening.
We had a kid. I don't know if you remember Matty Hickman,
Mhm.
but he passed away shortly after, or while I was still in college, actually. But I think a big, for me, my walk changed quite a bit. It became more serious when I saw the life of Matt Hickman. So he was a troubled kid at first. Like, he came to Cal Baptist. He had issues with alcohol and other things that, maybe for now it's not worth getting into. But we had a counselor on campus that would talk to him and pray with him and talk about things that Matty hoped to be or wished to be. And I saw a really stark change in Matty. Like, he went from a kid that was like getting blacked out like every night to a kid that he didn't drink. He was very serious about wrestling, and it wasn't even about that. It's not about what he was doing. It was about his character and the person, and where he was putting his interest and his time. And I think when I saw that in Maddie, my perspective changed, and especially when he passed. He did make it. He basically, don't want I don't want to get into like what caused him to pass, but I saw a huge change, and I saw someone that didn't have a lot, and they made a decision to be better, and and 100% turnaround. And then I thought about myself and the fact that I was given a lot. I was given a great home, not a lot of bad experiences. I didn't grow up with, I had a good support base growing up. And I thought I had to think seriously, like, well, what am I doing? Like, if I have this platform, why am I, going out and doing things that I shouldn't, when there are people that are given nothing and they're making a decision to turn their life around. And I don't know, it was very powerful, like to see his life, and um, ultimately he passed, and I realized how short our lives really are. At that point, it was the first time in my life that I really had experienced like a big death of someone very close to me. So it kind of fostered it caused me to think more about, like, why am I here, and with this short life, what am I going to do with it?
It's super tough when you have people that are close to you that are going through a hard time, and especially, something like that happens when they pass. And I think, again, it's like God kind of works in mysterious ways sometimes, and it's like, those people have an impact on other people's lives. It's like this big ripple effect, you
Yep.
know. And I think for Hick, I know a few guys I was teammates with at CCB were close to him, or just like growing up wrestling with him, or know him. For them it was like kind of a shock
Yeah.
when he passed. And I think, again, kind of just touching on what I was saying before, like when people that or that maybe are close with in some way, when they going through something or they pass, it's like, taking a breath and maybe trying to reflect on them and who they are. And I think, the gift that they kind of have in that situation is, hopefully they can impact other people. I
Yeah.
think, that's always kind of tough to kind of manage and deal with.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was. But it was there. The silver lining was he made a complete change, and honestly was happy. Like, you could see before, he's the funniest guy in the world too. He's always like, was the guy that came to practice, was lifting everybody up, like very, like, a great sense of humor. But he wasn't happy. You could see something was off prior to kind of this change that I was referring to. And then he did make that change, and you could see a difference in him, and it was inspiring. It was like, well, what does he have that I haven't found yet? So I guess that ultimately his success and his change kind of fostered some questions that in me, so that, yeah, it was a nice thing to see his turnaround.
Yeah. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about, like, when you're going through wrestling, are you know for sure, like, okay, after these 4 years I'm done. Maybe you're taking that break and then you're going to go right into law school. Is that kind of always your plan?
Yeah, it was my plan. I worked for my dad a couple summers at the law office, and I didn't know if it was for me. But that year kind of solidified it. But I knew I at least wanted to try it during that year. And I remember I just thought to myself, I've been in school for quite a long time, and I wanted 1 year to just see if it was right. And I'm glad I did. I really think it was a really nice reflective year. And I got to, sometimes, I mean, we all know from wrestling, sometimes you just need a break, to reset and everything. And that year was one of those. It was a year where I just kind of reset, thought about what I wanted to do. I thought that I had wanted to go to law school, but it didn't become real for me until I actually experienced it for myself, and I liked what I did. Our firm practices personal injury, which gets a bad rep, like as like ambulance chasers and things like that. But at the end of the day, like, I love what we do, and we don't market, we don't have a billboard, and like, some of these attorneys, you drive down the freeway and there's the billboards about they'll get you millions and things like that. And at the end of the day, I'm not taking away from what they do, because I'm sure they they've had a lot of success for their clients and everything. But our firm is like, we don't market. Most of our clients are probably, they know my dad in some fashion because of wrestling, like the wrestling community, or a parent, they're unfortunately they get involved in an accident, they need help. So um, I saw that there was an opportunity that I had some skills that I could use, and I liked that particular field that my dad was involved in. So law school was, everybody going into law school told me that I would hate it and it was miserable. And me, it was actually like fun, because it was something where I was like, okay, I like this, it's something I can do. And what I was learning was knowledge and skills that I would actually apply to my career. So it's kind of like, for those that go to trade school, they probably, some of them really enjoy it because it's like, really, they're going to use what they're learning in their day-to-day lives. And for me, that's kind of why I enjoyed law school, because I do use the things that I learned to some extent, like not everything, of course, and you learn about other subjects. But I also met a really good group of friends in law school, and that makes a difference too. You enjoy wrestling when you have good teammates, and it's like a brotherhood, and you have good friends. And law school is similar. You go through a lot. Like, it's a high stress environment, and there's a lot of similarities to wrestling. Not physical, but the mental aspect of, you take one final and that determines your entire grade in a class. Like, it's a lot of pressure. And so when you go through that with these other students, you kind of have a mutual respect, like you would in wrestling. Like, you see another wrestler, and there's an immediate respect factor, because you know the work that they've probably put into the sport. And there's so it's similar to law school. It's a really, other than medical school, it's probably one of the tougher educational systems. So yeah.
And you went to was it Pepperdine?
Chapman. I was
Chapman. Y'all can't get those confused. My
no, I,
bad.
no, Pepperdine's a great school. I was actually looking at Pepperdine. It's just the cost of living out there is pretty.
Yeah.
In Chapman, my grandma lived in Buena Park, so it's somewhat close
Nice.
to Orange, and I ended up living with her for the 3 years during law school, which was an awesome experience. She ended up passing while I was living with her, but the years that I had, like, I just would never take back, because I had that time with her, and we would have like wine nights and cook together and stuff, and it was a really awesome experience.
Yeah, I think one thing about getting to law school, I got to imagine is you're like you said, you're learning stuff that's tangible that you can actually use in the courtroom, and later with your career. I feel like with teaching, I was just reflecting on what you're talking, dude. We learned so much theory, and then as soon as you put it into like practice, like most of that stuff goes out the window. Like all your reps actually come from uh being in the classroom actually teaching. Is there anything that about being an attorney that kind of caught you off guard? Like, okay, we didn't learn about this in school, or like maybe you're first like getting on, and somebody that's been there before is like, all right, like you gotta make sure like these things are gonna happen. You gotta be ready for them that maybe they weren't gonna teach you in school.
Yeah, and first of all, law school is a lot of theory too. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a lot of theory, a lot of bull crap that you won't use as well. But I think even learning about other subject matter of the law, like you'll encounter it at some point. Like, you'll talk to an attorney, and there might be some theory that you learn that, like, you'll actually use, maybe just in a conversation, but just your knowledge about, you kind of, to pass the bar exam, you kind of have to have a really wide knowledge base of everything, even if it's just pretty shallow. Your knowledge base, you got to have a pretty comprehensive understanding of the law. But my school was very big on practical training. So we had competition teams, and I was part of the negotiation team. So we would mediate. So mediations, like, you got a judge, and you have two parties, plaintiff and defendant, and the judge helps bring or facilitate a settlement, and both sides are negotiating and saying, hey, I want this much. The other side's, no, we're only going to pay you this much, and you kind of bridge the gap. And so the negotiation aspect was like a really practical thing that I did, and Chapman was really focused on that. They like to think, or I guess one of their selling points, and it's true, is that by the time you exit Chapman, you are a little bit more, I think, practically trained, because they emphasize some of the tangible things, like negotiation, at least in my field, is really big. moot court, like mock trial. They were really big on those systems. But I mean, I've been surprised every day at the job where there's just old school attorneys. They've been doing it a long time, and you get humbled a lot. You get humbled where it's like, whether it just be a little procedural issue that they're one step ahead of you, and they knew of a little tactic that that helps them, at least puts them a little bit ahead of you. And so, just like wrestling, I'm constantly being humbled. But at the end of the day, I think that the cool thing about the legal field is I'm learning every day, and it's consider myself a lifelong student. I'm constantly trying to learn a little bit more and serve my clients better in that respect.
I feel like as a competitor, I feel like, one of the things that's fun, I'm sure, about what you're doing is it's a challenge. Like you're getting challenged every day. And I think, are there times where you feel like maybe, you're not growing at the rate that you want, or maybe you mess up and it's like, how do you kind of talk yourself back into, all right, you're fine. Like you're going to be okay. It's just a part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, there in my field, it can be really difficult because when you lose, you're losing not necessarily for yourself, but for someone else. Like we have death cases. We have people that, their family, their spouse was hit by a semi truck. So their sole provider is gone, so the money that you bring to the family is actually really critical to their future, to some extent. So I think the scariest thing about law is it's you have to, like, you're going to be accountable, but not just for yourself or someone else. And the weight is on you; it's on your shoulders to some extent. But like wrestling, you can't. You have to understand that you can only control so much, and you can only do your best job. And there have been times where you're kind of like, you're extremely upset, and it's again, it's not only you're not losing, or the loss is not really felt by yourself; it's felt by someone else. Um, but I think just controlling what you can. There's always going to be occasions where that happens, and you pick yourself up, you learn where you maybe made a mistake, and you make yourself better. And that's, I think that's the mark of a good wrestler. It's the mark of a good professional, just being able to pivot, look back and reflect on what they did right or wrong, and make those adjustments. But I mean, these high pressure situations, like I still, like, before I go into a deposition, I'll hop around, like, just like we would, when you,
Your pre-match routine.
yeah, because that you have, like, I'm a pretty, like, high energy person, so I can feel like my body's tense and I'm like stressed out, like, and I have to just like get it out somehow. So I'll just hop around before a deposition, and it actually, like, still to this day helps, because it's just, I think it's so deep in our, like, body. It's like almost physiological, like how you got to, like, get it out of and so yeah, I think just in general, wrestling prepared me for those. You're going to lose sometimes. There's someone out there that's better than you in some fashion, but you can only do your best. And yeah, there's also been a lot of successes, and like wrestling, when the feeling when you get your hand raised, when you help a client that's in extreme need, and they've been through tragedy beyond measure. It's a really great feeling too. Almost, I almost will say better, probably similar to when you've coached, someone and you see their hand get raised. It's almost like, we always talk about my hand getting raised and that feeling, but sometimes when you've seen your coaching, probably, I mean, I don't know, you can probably speak better on this, but your coaching come to fruition, and one of your kids win or make a huge turnaround, and they listened to you and it worked. I mean, I'm sure that's like an amazing feeling. I'd say that, I haven't felt that myself necessarily in coaching, but
Yeah.
that's probably the closest thing I can think of that would be similar to what I feel when, we're successful for a client.
Well, I think it's like it's almost like being on the same team, in the sense that when everybody is kind of vibing in the same way, and there's like this connection that happens, and when you say something or something that you worked on, and then you get put in that situation, and it's like, we're ready for this and it works. It's like there's like this link that happens between you and the wrestler. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not just me. It's not just them. It's like, it's us, and they have to ultimately do the work. So they get the credit. And I think with, I'm sure being an attorney, it's like it's not like you're just showing up. It's like you put all this work in and you get ready for the case, and then it's like, all right, now it's time to execute. And when you go through the process and it works, it's like, all right, like I did it, and that feeling is there. And especially like what you said, I'm sure, like with somebody that's maybe they lost a family member, or their life has changed because of this event. And when it comes out on the other side, and it's like that sense of relief kind of comes in, and it's like, man, they go right to you and they're like, I'm sure they're saying thank you, and we appreciate you and stuff. And that's got to feel good.
Yes, absolutely. And the cool thing about law too is it is similar to wrestling. The more you put in, you will see a return. Just like wrestling, I think wrestling's a little more direct. Like what you put in, literally you'll get back. And there are times where you just get tossed your back, like things happen like that. But
You get
I think
switched at the last 2 seconds of a match,
yeah,
things like that.
yeah, exactly. And in law school, I was hardly, I was like my LSAT score was a lot lower than most of the kids in my class, but looking back on it, without speaking highly of myself, I outperformed a lot of those kids because at the end of the day, for me, it wasn't about it's law is also not necessarily about intelligence or your gifts, I guess, to analyze or to compare to wrestling. It's about the work you put in. And a lot of kids, they're 4.0 students in college. They did very well in the SAT, but they're gifted, and they didn't necessarily do well in law school because they would rely on their ability to be a good test taker. But in law school, you can't just be a good test taker. There's too much to know. There's too much work to be done. So it would really separate the people that are willing to go the extra distance from the person that's just relying on, being a smart or a good test taker. So I think that also wrestling instilled that in me too. Like if I outwork someone, it will pay off. Like as long as I put in the work, I don't need to worry about this person being, a little bit smarter, a little bit more gifted in other areas. Like I will receive there's going to be an outcome or a benefit to me putting in the work.
It's like that knowledge of, you have the confidence that you can outwork people. Like,
Yeah.
like that's your gift, and it's kind of like the odds are there, or something happens, or maybe, yeah, whatever the situation is, it's like there's, yeah, I just have to work. Like that's what I'm good at. Like, and you have that confidence going into something. It's like, yeah, try to stop me. It's like you can't,
Yeah.
because you have that self belief and that work ethic to back it up.
In wrestling, when you have that confidence, when you put in the work and you step out on the mat and you know that you've done everything you can to prepare for that moment. Law school's similar. Maybe if you hadn't done all the preparation, you go into the test and you're more nervous because you know that you kind of cut corners. And so I guess my goal in law school is just to do it right. Like I remember there's a lot of supplements. You can go online and find out, like, there's case summaries and things. And I did utilize some of that because you have to, but for the most part, it's like, no, I'm gonna do this as right as possible and read every word of the text and see, what actually do it the right way. And wrestling teaches you that. Like when you're doing sprints, I remember trying to cut corners. Coach would catch you, and at first it was like, oh damn, coach caught me. Like I'm upset that they saw me. But then later on, when it's just you and it's you're in that moment where everything comes down to your preparation, you understand that it's not because the you cutting that corner really impacts yourself and nobody else. And so that mindset of like, I'm not doing it to just check the box that I did everything right. I'm doing it right because I want to set myself up for success.
And you can control your effort and your attitude and your ability to do the right thing, even though it's uncomfortable. When you get put out there in a big moment and you know that you took a shortcut, and even it might not even be, under a conscious level, somebody might just be in a situation where they can just push a little bit harder. But because you didn't finish that sprint, 3 months later, you get put in a situation because you didn't finish it correctly. You end up taking that loss. And that's probably the part that sucks the most. And I think it's kind of like when you put so much effort into preparing and being confident, whatever the outcome is, it's like, I know I did everything right. Like, I'm not concerned. You know, it's like I know I did everything I could.
Yeah, 100%. That's so. Yeah, that mindset is what I tried to implement in law school, and and also I think one last thing I'll say is staying in your lane. There's a lot of comparing that happens in law school. Like, what is this person doing when they're studying, or what is that person doing, or what supplement are they using, or are they going and talking to their professor to get an advantage or things like that. Wrestling does teach you to, like, I'm going to focus on the work I put in, and I'm going to be confident in that. And especially transitioning into like college, you have a base that you're good at, your technique or your skill set. And as much as like you can look at someone else's skill set in college, and you do want to learn and continue to improve your skill set, but you have to be confident in the base that you have. Like, you can't change your entire skill set when you go into college. And the same is true with law school. You have to rely or trust in the things that got you there, and trust in your ability, and don't focus. You have to avoid focusing on what everybody else is doing, and I think that made a difference too for me.
Yeah, that's hard to do. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's like you just
yeah,
gotta focus on yourself.
absolutely.
So, before we're kind of getting towards the end here, but I do have a couple questions. Jiu-jitsu, is it Backbone Jujitsu that you're training at and teaching at right now? How I feel like this is a big kind of big question that gets asked a lot, but like, how was the transition when you first like, all right, like I'm done wrestling, I want to get in jiu-jitsu. I mean, I feel like you probably have a pretty heavy advantage going into jiu-jitsu competition just because you compete at grappling at a high level already with college wrestling.
It is a heavy advantage, no question about that. But there were times where, especially in the training room, you get caught in a guillotine, or you're shooting a double, but your head's left right there. It's like butter for these jiu-jitsu guys. So there were times where I would be humbled too. There's many times where I'm like, well, I gotta be better in that aspect. But it's definitely a huge advantage, wrestling is. But I think for me, I mean, just like on a technical level, I loved low singles, like low shots and everything. And they don't, not that they don't work at jiu-jitsu. It's just, people can kick out, and they're kind of more
There's
scramble.
no shoe like to really like grip onto. They can just, yeah,
Exactly.
put their
They
foot out.
Yep. Same with MMA. Like, they'll do that a lot, where you just turn and kick. So I kind of changed to just straight up double legs, because um, then you don't have to worry about the guy pulling guard, because in a lot of these tournaments they'll pull guard right away, like if they know you're a wrestler. So, but the rule set is that they have to grab you first, and then they can pull guard. If they just pull guard when you're at space, when you're in a neutral position, it's actually a disadvantage, or you get an advantage point in most tournaments. So
Yeah.
that's the benefit of a double leg. Like, you're in space, and you can take them down before they pull guards. Basically, the difference is you get your takedown points from the outset of the match. Um, so from a technical perspective, I worked a lot more on my double leg takedowns. But from just everywhere else, I think for me, I didn't even intend on competing. I just wanted to do something to stay in shape, and I think with most wrestlers, it's irreplaceable, the feeling of wrestling, like whatever it is, like the contact of it, and being able to just throw someone to their back. Like, there's just, you can go weightlift, you can, and I don't want to take away from people that have stopped wrestling, and they make, maybe they're a bodybuilder now. Like, that's great, but for them, for me, that wasn't enough. Like, I needed that contact, and I didn't plan on competing. I just wanted something that would stay in shape, and still have that competitive contact, even just training wise. And then I just kind of rolled into competition. It was just, my coach was like, "Hey, there's this tournament coming up." It was actually at my high school, Martin Luther King High School, so it was
Nice.
kind of full circle. But yeah, I think for me, it was just, I wanted to stay in shape and do something where you have an outlet to release your stress in a physical way.
I think that's actually very interesting. You talk about like, once you're done wrestling, there's not anything that can kind of replace that part.
Yep.
Um, and even it, maybe people do decide, hey, I want to compete in freestyle or Greco, after you're done, and still wrestle. Um, you only got so many miles that you can put on your body before it's like, all right, like you're gonna keep getting banged up, or it's just gonna be uncomfortable just to live. I think jujitsu is a little bit more laid back, and you can kind of I've done a couple open rooms, and uh I don't know, it's just way more chill of a vibe, and people are like excited to see you, and they're all happy. They're like, hey, yeah, let's roll, and like it kind of threw me for a loop at first when I first went in there. I'm like, let's roll. Like, you mean like let's try to kill each other? Like, what do you mean? You know, but I feel like it's a cool environment, and I think it allows sometimes for maybe certain wrestling mindsets to kind of relax a little bit. And I think that's kind of what's trendy right now with wrestling is like learning how to relax and kind of flow through positions a little bit more.
Yeah, you're right. Like that's like the Penn State thing right now, right? Like they kind of get in a position and they play wrestle a little bit.
Yeah.
But jujitsu is way more laid back, and for me, it was also, miles on the body. I wanted to do something that I could continue to do till I'm 60, or like for as long as I need to stay in shape. And it's also a fun thing to maybe pursue something else. Your black belt, or it's just different. It's another. I guess it's the next frontier for me. And in wrestling, you're right. You only have a certain amount of time. You don't. Nobody's hard like slapping a collar tie on you jiu-jitsu in the jiu-jitsu room, or lifting you and slamming you from a standing position. So it's something that I could do for a while, and it's something new. But the technique aspect, like learning the submissions, has actually been really fun for me because it's something where you can be a little more lethal. Wrestling, at the end of the day, it's the best base. Like to be able, I think in MMA, like, or fighting in general, wrestling is the best base. I think that that's kind of somewhat proven, but there's arguments other ways. But in addition to wrestling, if you can learn to be a little more lethal too, like that's awesome as well. And there's art to being able to like hit a particular choke or an arm bar, things like that. And so I think that it's been really fun for me to learn this new technical skill set, whereas before wrestling, like by no means did I exhaust like my skill set. There's a lot of technique that I never learned, but jiu-jitsu opened up like a new variety of things to learn.
Yeah, and it's exciting. And again, you're a competitor. It's challenging. It's the same thing like with learning law, and it's like this whole new world. That's kind of for yours to conquer.
Absolutely.
Well, cool, man. Super excited and thankful that you were able to come on. Before we kind of cut it, do you have anything else you don't want to share or talk about?
No, that was awesome. Thank you, Brian. Sometimes it's fun to do things like this because you get perspective. Just talking about things, you kind of get it allows you to think back on everything, and you get a new perspective. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And best of luck to your kids at Frontier and everything. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.